Welcome back to Build a Mobile App in 2 Hours. In this session, we're going to update the dashboard screen. To update the dashboard screen, there are a number of changes that we'd like to make. We're going to change the title to PlanetHopper. We'd like to change the name that exists into our trip name. And here we see the number of people that are going to an event. We're going to change this to the number of planets we plan to visit. We have some dates, so we'll update the dates to be the dates for our space trip. And then the See Details button will take us to the trip detail screen. There is something called the blank slate underneath this, and that means that if we come to this and we don't find any existing trips, then we should show basically a flat background and allow someone to start planning a new trip. So we'll go ahead and edit those as well. Lots to do. Let's go ahead and get started. To update the dashboard, let's go to the User Interface tab, and if we go up to the main flow, we see the home screen. And the home screen is what we keep referring to as our dashboard. So we'll change it to dashboard and we'll open it up as our dashboard. So this is the dashboard for planet hopping. So let's change the text here to Planet Hopper. And now when we look at the dashboard, there's a lot of information here on these cards. And that's coming from a data action that knows how to get that data. So let's right-click on the dashboard and get the data that we'll need for the card by fetching it from local storage. The information that we're going to start with is actually going to be based around the local space trip. And if we expand, we have all the different parts of the local space trip, but we also need to know the number of planets. As part of the summary, we'd like to be able to get that info. So if we add a source to our local space trip, we can use the local space trip planets to tell us the number of planets that are set for this particular space trip. Now, for us to be able to make sure that for each of these trips we can count up how many of these other things exist, let's select all the elements of the local space trip, and we're going to group by those. Since they're all part of the same record and we group them, that will sort of make sense. From there, we want to know how many of these things actually exist. And they'll be unique if there's an ID for the local space trip planet. So let's count how many unique IDs there are for each of these sets. So that gives us the data that we need. And if we go back to the dashboard screen, to be able to tell what we should replace here, let's get rid of the dashboard card data. If we delete that, a lot of things turn red. So if we click on the first red piece that we see the list is unhappy, and that's because the dashboard cards were returning a list. We've just set up a new list for the Get Local Space Trips list. And since this is the basis for all the data that we're using on the cards, I'm going to copy that list because we can probably reuse it in a number of places. Now if we want to change the name of the trip, let's see if the pull-down menu, it does have a suggestion because name is there. And if we want to set the dates, we're formatting the date and time. And if I drag this up, we can see that the format for the date and time has a current departure date, and all we need to do is change the list from the dashboard card to our local space trip list. And we can do the same thing for the other date. If I double click, it opens. Let's substitute our space trip list for the dashboard list. And now we have the data there just fine. When we click on the number, we actually see that this expression is the same example and the same value. So let's change the example just to prove we changed it. And in this case, the value needs to be something different. So the value here should be from our space trip list. We'll grab the current part of the list. And if we open that up some more, so we can also do it from here, we can see that we have the name, the ID. So here we can get the count. So this will be the count for the current one in the list. So that looks good. So this tells us how many planets we're going to be visiting. In the event, it was how many people are going. So people was plural, so we'll just change that to planets. Person was obviously singular, so we'll change that to just planet. And then those people were going to the event. We're going to say that we have planets, and those are going to be the planets to visit. Okay, so there's still sort of a little red line in the background here, and we can't quite find where the error is. The nice thing is in the lower left, true change will tell us if we scroll up. So if I double click on the error, it's looking to see that the dashboard card list is not empty. So let's check to make sure that our planets trip list is not empty. And in that if, so here we see the if it's not empty, it shows the card. If it is empty, then we get down to the bottom here where we have the unhappy face because we have no events. Well, in our case, we would have no trips, and although that may make us unhappy, what we'd really like to do is try to motivate you by showing you a planet picture or the globe to go ahead and start planning. And it is a start to planning, but let's call it start planet hopping to kind of motivate them to go do it. Now, that's the text. If we actually look at the button itself, so here the button on click is staying on the current screen. If you don't have any trips and you want to start planet hopping, you should plan a new trip, and that would take us to the new space trip screen. So that takes care of what happens if we don't have any current trips. New event we had already set to go to a new space trip, so maybe we should have updated the text as well there. So this will be a new space trip. And last but not least, we have the see details. So given the name of a trip with 4 or 5 planets and a set of dates, I'd like to see the planets and the details. Well, here on click, again, we're just staying on the current screen. Obviously, to see the details of our trip, we need to go to the space trip details. And I accidentally opened the properties here, but what we really need is a local space ID. And that will come from the aggregate. It will know the current ID from the list that we're working on. So just to double check that, if we go inside, we see that the list goes to the current, and where we were getting the count and the departure dates, it does have the right ID. So we've set everything up to make the dashboard be interactive and have the right data. Let's publish this to the server so that we can try testing it out in the emulator. Okay, so if we open our browser, we have the updated app, we give it the pin, and we see the trip to Mars we created last time, and it had 9 planets. We can go to see the details, and there are the 9 planets and the trip to Mars that was from last time. If we go back to the dashboard, we can also create a brand new trip. So we had Mars, we could go to Venus. So let's do a trip to Venus. We'll pick some different dates, continue. We'll grab some planets to go to along the way. We'll throw a lot more away this time, and we'll stay with about 5 or 6 and book the trip. So we have 2, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's go back to the dashboard. And we see our trip to Mars with our dates. We see the moons of Jupiter, and we see the trip to Venus. So it is updating this. We have the right number of planets. We can always go back and see the details. So the app is behaving very well. The only thing we haven't been able to test is we don't have the ability at the moment to delete trips, so that we could get back to the point where we have none and we could make sure that our blank slate was able to get us to start planet hopping properly. So that's it for the app and the overall course. You've finished building the PlanetHopper app. You could make some more advances on the app, like adding the ability to delete different trips or even update and change trips. Over time, we'll be adding new things to kind of make the app more interesting, so check back every once in a while to see how things are going. So that's it for this session. Hope you enjoyed creating the PlanetHopper app.